white boy!
So first thing we got is the 3 new Titans for Modern Horizons 3 and... Oh, I see what's going on. Y'all think I play with proxies with fake-ass cards because I'm some sort of little bitch. Nah, we don't do that shit around here. Nah, we're good, man. Authenticated cards just don't fit in normal sleeves. You know what I'm saying? So, it is what it is, but we make do. So, thank you. So what's up, everybody? Obviously, I was playing in the outro a little bit. Shout out to you for sticking around. But we're going to start my deck tech for Ulalek Fuse Atrocity. So this deck I absolutely fell in love with the second that I played it, and they spoiled the card. I already knew that I would love this card so much. It's way different than other 5-color commanders in the fact that this isn't just get infinite mana and win. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of intricacies and ways you can build it, and just copying your stack allows for a lot of cool interactions that you probably haven't seen before, such as copying fetch lands, copying Rhystic Study triggers, all sorts of everything. You can copy the whole stack when your creatures have flash, which lets you add another layer of deck building to it. I think the card design is 10 out of 10. It's allowing you to have access to Wooburg without making it so obvious it's painful, such as things with the Dragon. There's no deck building in the Dragon. You put a bunch of dragons in it that have a generic mana cost, and they're cheaper now, and then your commander draws a bunch of cards. There's really nothing to it. But this deck, it allows a real mastermind to take place and drive the helm of what is still a powerful commander. So the way I built this deck personally is I have every single legal Eldrazi Titan in this deck. It's just how you got it. We're just that kind of man, you know. So we have Rise the Eldrazi in it. We obviously have our big finishers. But I wanted to make the deck as good as it could, keep the card quality high, follow some sub-themes, play a bunch of lands. So the idea is just play a bunch of good cards, man. Play a bunch of good cards, but you still get to win with impactful, awesome Eldrazi and be able to really show your talent and skill of the game by some of the interactions you can take place. And there's really no other way to list them all besides going through the deck. So we're going to start with the creatures. So first and foremost, we obviously have the 3 Eldrazi Titans that were introduced in Modern Horizons 3 and are able, the commander too. So I'm not going to go over their abilities specifically. They're big, powerful spells that cost a lot of mana, but are appropriately costed for what they do for their mana cost. So I just won't waste too much time getting into them. What's important is get through the deck and mention the synergies that allow the abilities to be super broken. So Kozilek, Butcher Truth, Rise the Eldrazi Titan. The other Kozilek lets you draw a bunch of cards, counter a bunch of spells if the things line up. Emrakul, the Promised End. You can really take someone's turn, screw them over. Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre. Gets rid of a troublesome threat, Annihilator 4, and Indestructible. You don't want to get attacked too many times by him. Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, exiling 2 permanents in their library at every swing, plus being indestructible. Dodges every board wipe except Farewell and Toxic Deluge, practically speaking. And so, obviously, super good cards, super good additions, and they're obviously why I built the deck the way that I built it. So Void Winnower, it cuts your opponents off of playing even spells and even blocking with even costed creatures. So this is just a card that could potentially win you on the spot. Super powerful, one of my favorite creatures that ever existed. I love creatures that are just big creatures plus stacks, such as Jin Gataxia's Progress Tyrant. My favorite, to after my own heart. Next, we're going to go into the creatures that sort of have utility and synergy with the deck, and then we'll get into the creatures that, make mana. So, whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library and you draw 2 cards. One thing I find often enough with this deck is you'll run out of cards. That's sort of the weakness of the deck. So, it's an Eldrazi. You could get 2 of this. Exiling the top 2 cards of their library can be very good if they're playing combo decks or decks where certain cards are very pivotal to the strategy. You can't write it off, especially if you have 2 of them in play. Exiling the top 4 cards of their library, and that's just their land for turn. Let's say they ramp, that could be 12 cards a turn they exile off the top of their library, and you're drawing a bunch of cards. So you just want to be careful not to deck yourself. I guess it's certainly possible, but you'll probably definitely win by then. Null Drifter, it allows you to just evoke. It's just one of those cards you play because I wanted to stay on theme with Eldrazi. I certainly wouldn't be mad if you cut this card. However, just playing Divination, it triggers up the Beanstalk, spoiler alert. It triggers Ulalek. So Skittering Cicada is definitely one of those cards that is hyper slept on, with giving your colorless spells flash. When your Eldrazi have flash and you're able to flash manipulate the stack rather than just getting the Eldrazi and the trigger cast both, or like doubling up, it really is where the big brain plays come in, and it's where all the super cool stuff comes into play. And him himself getting +X+X, where X is that spell's mana value, and then being able to copy that ability, and trample, by the way, you do not sleep on this boy Cicada, man. He is super good in this deck. Dimensional Infiltrator, speaking of giving spells flash and sometimes exiling the right cards off the top of their library, with this being an instant speed activated ability, it makes it so you can activate a bunch of times, and then with an Eldrazi that has flash, respond to your own triggers and then copy the stack, so you sort of double up on its ability. But it's mainly in the deck because it has flash, and it will help trigger our Ulalek. It's definitely a card you could cut, but I like the card for this deck. Roaming Throne, it's a super no-brainer. This card is actually one of the cards that allows you to go infinite with Ulalek as long as you have 2 mana, because it makes it so when you cast an Eldrazi, the Eldrazi trigger will happen twice, and then Ulalek's trigger will happen twice. That being said, when Ulalek has 2 triggers on the stack, when you copy an Ulalek trigger with an Ulalek trigger, you will essentially be able to do that as many times as you want, having the stack as infinite as you please, as long as you have 2 mana to pay for it. So no brainer, cannot cut this card. And next we have just our ramp cards. Delighted Halfling gives us a colorless mana. It synergizes with Forsaken Monument, and also, since we play all the Titans and obviously our commander, this line of text comes up a good bit where they cannot counter our commander, and it gives us the colorless for all our colorless spells, so can't hate on that. Oracle of Moldiah, the lands are very important with this deck, such as playing Tron, Ancient Tomb, Ugin's Labyrinth. It's just, your land base is so much more powerful than the average deck that I think it's worth playing this card. It's something you could cut. Birds of Paradise, Snapping Void Crawl, just makes mana. Sowing Mycosponth, a powerhouse of a card that I thought would be good, but it really showed me how good it was. When you copy this, you get to, with Ulalek, you get to exile, assuming you kicked it, you get to exile 2 lands of your opponents. That's always great, but you get 2 lands from your deck. So that means that if you have one single piece of Tron in play, you get to search for your other 2 pieces of Tron. Or you can get your command tower. Even if you have 0 pieces of Tron, you can get the Nexus card, the new card, and you can get Urza's Tower, and you mathematically essentially gotten 2 Ancient Tombs with no downside. And then they can also filter mana, one of the Ancient Tombs. So it's just so good. It is so good. Don't sleep on your boy. Glaring Fleshraker, super busted, man. One of the best creatures you can play in the decks, especially early on. It's just whenever you cast a colorless spell, create that spawn, man. And whenever it synergizes with itself, whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, you do 1 damage to each opponent. So super busted. Super busted. Obviously ramps you a good bit. You play a lot of colorless spells. I don't know why you wouldn't include this card in your deck. It just seems weird. And then we just got Land of War Elves. So Just a little bit of ramp creatures, a little bit of ramp dorks, and some good high quality synergy. Next, we're going to do artifacts. So specifically, we're going to start with artifacts that don't produce mana. There's not a lot of them, but Mystic Forge obviously lets you play most of your deck, and finding the right cards you need, it's sort of pseudo card draw. Being able to find cards you need, get rid of cards you don't need right now, it's super good in any deck that makes use of Mystic Forge, in my opinion. Lightning Greaves needs no introduction. It just gives a creature protection, but more importantly, it can give an Eldrazi Titan haste where they're big stats, and especially if they have Annihilator. Yeah, Annihilator 4 is no joke against the right deck. The One Ring, another card that needs no introduction. Super busted, super broken. We're going to play synergy cards to get this card consistently. It being 4 generic mana. I got to be careful not to say colorless because it does matter. So it's 4 generic mana. And the games where you draw the One Ring versus the games where you don't draw the One Ring are so different from each other. Definitely a card you want to pick up. Hedron Archive, classic, just gets you some more mana. Mind Stone, mana that turns into card draw. Like I said, the weakness of this deck is not having enough cards in your hand, so I'm trying to alleviate that with the micro synergies as much as possible. Mana Vault, shouldn't have to explain. Felwar Stone lets you get all the mana. You can always make use of any mana with the deck being 5 colors. Sometimes it's just another Arcane Signet, so I thought it was worth playing. Thran Dynamo, very good return. Candelabra of Tawnos, especially at its price, I could see you cutting. But I just wanted to play this card because you don't get too many opportunities to play it in decks now, because it just makes it so, for example, if you don't know this card, you have to tap it. It doesn't just go infinite. But if you have Tron and you tap Tron for 7, you can pay 3 mana to untap the Tron land. So you've essentially netted an extra 4 off of your Tron. Same thing with Ugin's Labyrinth. It's just 1 mana. It's essentially, if you only have Ugin's Labyrinth and this in play, it is tap it for 1 and you pay 1 to untap your Labyrinth. So it's essentially a 1 mana artifact that taps for 1 colorless, so you have 1 land that synergizes with it. Super good. Cuttable though. Cuttable because you won't always get it all the time. Arcane Signet, just good ramp card. Lets you play all your colored spells. Forsaken Monument, super freaking good. Doubling your mana and going infinite with Basalt Monolith is crazy. You just get colorless mana right off rip just by playing 2 cards in your deck that you want. It super good synergy. I would even play just one over the other or whatever, but they're both so cheap that it's hard to argue against them. Grim Monolith, just another big ramp card that lets you make use of the colorless mana as best as you can, and it's just such a good investment. 2 mana for 3 mana. Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, blah blah blah. I saw that coming. Next, we're going to get into enchantments. So probably the coolest, most important enchantment to get into is Echoes of Eternity. I would learn the math on this card before you even play a game with your friends, just to not bore them out of your minds by Googling shit. It's a kindred enchantment, Eldrazi, which means that you can copy it with Ulalek itself. So essentially, when you have 2 of these in play, you will get a colorless spell 5 times. So if you cast Soul Ring, you will end up with 5 Soul Rings. That's what I meant if I worded it weird. Whenever you cast a Glaring Fleshraker, if you have 2 of these in play, you'll get 5 at the end of the stack resolving. Super good card, super impactful. It's practically your commander again in the deck, but when you have both of them, it double synergizes. Super good card. It's so cheap, I don't know why you wouldn't pick it up, but make sure you have this. Next is Power Artifact. This is one of those cards that's cuttable, but I thought maybe I would try it. It lets it so you can enchant Grim Monolith and Basalt Monolith to untap and tap it infinite times, creating infinite mana. It also lets you get it with a card that I guess I'm talking myself into it, Enlightened Tutor. It makes it so if you were to draw Power Artifact or one of the monoliths, you can always Enlightened Tutor for the other one, and then Enlightened Tutor also gets you the One Ring. It's not in this deck right now, but I'll probably end up cutting a card for Enlightened Tutor, just so y'all know. From Beyond, I thought was bait. I thought it was normie Timmy bait. But just getting that extra 1 mana every turn and then having the Tutor whenever you need it, because Tutors are essentially better than card draw. And the weakness of the deck is card draw. You see where I'm going with that. So From Beyond, I think, is worth playing and trying. If you don't like it, take it out. But I think it's helped me a lot in my games. Kozilek's Unsealing is one of those no-brainer kind of cards. Kozilek's Unsealing lets you play it, and your commander gets you another 2 mana. And like I said, weakness is card draw. So once you play a Titan, man, you're good. Especially if you have Ulalek in play and you copy the stack, man, you'll draw 6 cards off your Titan. You're essentially set for the rest of the game unless you hyper bricked. So Nether Void is a card like Candelabra of Tawnos. For the price of it, I could definitely see why you wouldn't play it. But it's one of those cards where you don't really get to play it in much else. I really wanted to try and make it work in this. It essentially makes it so all your opponents, or everyone's spells cost 3 more or they get countered. So, with Cavern of Souls, Shocker, we play that. It lets us so your Eldrazi don't actually cost 3 more, but you'll get so much mana with this deck so fast and efficiently that I feel like you can just sort of muscle over the Nether Void tax while your opponents really don't have that much mana, as much mana as you. So definitely cuttable, but I think it's super fun and interesting. Sylvan Library lets you just see more through your deck, typical green card stuff. Wild Growth is also in the deck because unlike a Mana Dork, it doesn't die to removal. And also, or board wipes, maybe not single target removal, but it doesn't die to Damnation, which a lot of people play. But it also synergizes with Candelabra of Tawnos, tapping for an additional 1 when we tap the land. Exploration is definitely, the lands are so important and so strong in this deck that I'm trying a little exploration package out. It's cuttable if you disagree with me, but I think that your land base is so impactful to the overall way the game plays that I wanted to try it. I want to see how it worked. Rhystic Study, no-brainer, super broken card. One thing to note, though, is that you are having a little stack war going. You can copy your Rhystic Study triggers with Ulalek. So, something to maybe think about that might come up once. Up the Beanstalk, we play a lot of big cards in this deck. When you've played Up the Beanstalk and then cast your commander, you are 2 mana drawing 2. I think that's super good in this deck. You can remove it if you wish. Alright, so next we're going to get into sorceries. So first we're going to start off with Windfall and Wheel of Fortune. Like I said, if you're able to dump out your hand very fast and get a bunch of mana and then cast one of these, you will be so far ahead of your opponents. And it's also part of the exploration package I mentioned. Like you play exploration on turn 1 and then play another land, and then the next turn you go land, and then wheel. You're so far ahead, it's crazy. I think that if you're going to play exploration, you have to play both of these. And then even if you don't play exploration, I do think that they're good enough to consider, just because you'll sometimes play out your hand so fast and have so much mana that sometimes you just don't need the rest of the cards in your hand, and you just rather have a Titan or something else, anything else. Explore is like the same as the exploration theme. Additional land, draw a card. Like to draw cards. Toxic Deluge is the most mana efficient board clear in the format, pretty much. So it's just a good card to play. Your commander also has 5 health, so against any commander that's not a little bigger than most people's, you can cast this board wipe successfully and keep your commander. I'd say a good bit of the time, maybe a lot's a little generous, but a good bit of the time you can cast this and keep your commander while clearing the creatures on the board. So super good. Rise of the Eldrazi, whoever made this not a kindred sorcery at Wizards, we're gonna have a fist fight in Minecraft. So it's just another stupid broken card that you play, that I will play no matter how unoptimal it makes the deck, even though it's a pretty good card for all the reasons we mentioned. Destroys a permanent, draw 4 cards, extra turn. Good enough for me. Night's Whisper, just a 2-mana draw 2. It's cuttable, but I like it. Preordain is sort of the same reason as Night's Whisper. It lets you look through your deck, draw a card, you get to see 3 cards with it. And with this deck, you kind of want particular cards, so you'll usually put them at the bottom. Transmute Artifact, super good in this deck. It lets you, if you have Power Artifact in your hand, it lets you transmute an artifact into a Grim Monolith or, Basalt Monolith. And just in case you're new, what Transmute Artifact does is essentially it lets you sacrifice an artifact that's in play. Let's say it costs 2 mana, and I'm able to look through my deck to get any artifact I please and put it into play. But I must pay the difference in their mana cost if it costs more. So if I sacrifice my Arcane Signet to get the One Ring, when the One Ring enters play, I gotta pay 2 mana or else it'll sacrifice itself. So super impactful card, super versatile, letting you get the One Ring or more mana rocks or anything really. It turns an artifact into a better artifact, and most of the time you have the mana to pay the difference. And sometimes maybe you just want a card that costs the same, so it's just 2 mana flat out. Super great card, definitely worth picking up for this deck. Getting the One Ring is so important. Ancient Stirrings, modern staple. It's practically 5-card impulse in this deck. Usually you don't even want the colored cards, because usually colored cards just get more colorless cards in this deck, so super worth playing, super awesome. Demonic Tutor is a no-brainer in any deck with black that's not maybe completely aggro to the point where in any deck where you're not just curving out the whole way through and trying to kill your opponents in a more aggressive fashion. Demonic Tutor is an snap auto include. All is Dust, usually a pretty one-sided board wipe. It's hard to imagine a world where you're really missing your stuff more than your opponents will miss all of theirs. Doesn't hit your commander or any of your titans, all your Eldrazi creatures. It lets you copy it if that ever comes up, but probably won't. Ponder, the same reason as Preordain, but it's just a stronger Preordain. Super good. Farseek, you play all the dual lands in this deck, so you have a green if you're missing a color or need the double blue for your power artifact or transmute. You just get whatever you need. It's all good. Next, we're going to get on to, Planeswalker. It's Ugin the Ineffable. It's the only Planeswalker you play. It's a good destroy card. It helps you kind of draw through your deck in a way. Just impactful, super good. I think you could cut it for more efficient because it does cost 6 mana, even though it does a good bit of good stuff. It's definitely cuttable for a better card. Next, we're going to get into Instants. Obviously, Mana Drain. Super good. They've been printing this thing into the ground. They obviously want it in Commander. Your play group is too powerful for your play group. That's your business. But obviously, they want Mana Drain to be in Commander as many times as they printed it. Super good. Kozilek's Command, an instant. It also triggers Ulalek because a Kindred instant is super good if you have something mighty impactful in the stack you'd love to copy. You could just pay it for 2 mana or X equals 0 if you're in a pinch for mana. But even let's say you don't do that and you want to just copy Kozilek's Command, it's super good rate, man. Even if X equals 2 and you copy it with Ulalek, that's 6 mana to create 4 Scions, and then you'll scry 4 or 2 twice and draw a card, so you'll get 2 Preordains and 4 Scions or spawn out of the deal. Kozilek's Command, super good in this deck. And it sometimes is removal when you really need it. Most people's commanders don't cost that much, so having the mana value of the creature tied to its cost in this deck usually doesn't matter. Usually don't. Ugin's Binding is definitely one of those cards that is a no-brainer. It's 3 mana for a bounce, but then you get a 0 mana Cyclonic Rift for doing what you want to do in this deck and casting big Eldrazi Titans. Stupid card that exists that is given graciously by Wizards to make Eldrazi players happy. It is so broken in this deck, it's not even funny. Super good. Dark Ritual. Oddly enough, it is kind of shitty. It doesn't help you play your commander. I wouldn't even be mad if you cut Dark Ritual, but I'm still trying it out. This deck's still new to me. I haven't had the most time to play with it and do everything. Tainted Pact is one of those cards I jammed in here for card quality to make sure we can get certain cards. Although it's cuttable in the sense that sometimes looking for a specific card, you can exile too many cards because we don't have any spectacular win conditions. We sort of have to win the game in a more normal or fairer kind of route. Even though our card quality is so high, we're still winning the game with cards in our deck and not some sort of 2-card combo. That being said, Tainted Pact is cuttable, but I'm also trying it out, and the ability to get lucky and it be in like the top part of your deck, and you exile a bunch of lands or maybe exploration at that point, stuff you don't need. Like if you're looking for a Titan, you don't really need exploration anymore. So some of the cards are okay to exile, but it hurts when you exile a bunch of stuff that you don't like to or don't want to. Growth Spiral, it's also cuttable, but I like trying it out because you get your colors pretty consistent in this deck, and there's so much ramp in the deck that you don't have to do it turn 2 or even very early. You'll get around to it when you get to it, but cuttable. Eldritch Immunity was a card I slept on at first, just because it's like, it's just a 1 mana gain protection. It's just like counter, a spell that targets an Eldrazi you control. But I really thought about it. It being Kindred, instant, and 1 mana really lets you take over the stack sometimes. And sometimes when your opponents have responses to your stack, let's say you're doing a big old Ulamog stack and you get to win the game off of it, but they have something or another. They have something to respond to it, whether it's Teferi's Protection or anything, Whirlwind Denial, whatever. Right? You play Eldritch Immunity in response to it, and then you get to copy the stack all over again. So if they do it when you're about to win to die, when they're about to die to the stack, then you just in response do it, and then you copy it and you'll win. Super good, super impactful. I haven't actually played a game with it, but the utility of it I think is worth playing. Like I said, as an instant, I'm probably going to put an Enlightened Tutor in here when I have the money for one. It is just one of those things where I'm not sure about it. I'm gonna have to, but I think I talked myself into it, this deck tech. So if there's any card you don't want, I would definitely cut Enlightened Tutor for it. Next, we're gonna get into lands, and we'll be done. Alright, so first we're gonna go over the utility lands because they're the actual interesting lands in the deck. The rest just make colors and are super boring. So Winding Canyon will come in untapped, give 1 colorless mana, but it also lets you tap it for 2 and give all your Eldrazi flash. And that can add up to be a really big deal because that can allow you to super manipulate the stack. Because if you have, it takes a lot of cards and mana, but super cool. If you cast an Eldrazi Titan, doesn't matter which one, then Ulalek triggers, then in response to the Ulalek trigger, you cast an Eldrazi with flash. You will then get another Ulalek trigger. That allows you, as long as you have 2 mana, will allow you to copy the stack indefinitely. So super good synergy to have, and flash is good, and it's practically no downside, truly, because you need lanes that make colorless mana. Balin's Tomb, Ancient Tomb, just adds 2, super good in this deck. We make the best use out of colorless mana, so it's just as good as it always is, but even a little bit better. Cavern of Souls, this produces a colorless mana, actually, very important for Forsaken Monument, but all of our Eldrazi have 1 colorless pip, if not 2, so it makes it super good and useful, and you never need you usually always have the 2nd color if you're casting Sire of Stagnation, but gives your Eldrazi uncounterable, plus you still get to keep the downside with Forsaken Monument. Goated land, super goated land. We have Tron. I like the new version of Tron because it lets you visually see with 0 thought which one is which, being as though they're colored differently. But, obviously they're Tron, so you play them. Not much to go over. With Nexus or Planar Nexus, however, there's a little bit to go over.
This will let you get Tron without all three. So you have Urza's Tower and player next doesn't play Tron, or the Urza Tower will tap for 3. And the same thing with the other two, they'll tap for 2. So player Nexus is super good. Super good. It has that color fixing in there because you'll have a lot of mana, just might be colorless. And it really helps you cast your spells. It's super good. You would definitely overlook that line of text, but in this deck, no way, man. Super good. Urza's Saga. Urza's Saga. It's just colorless land, a little bit of upside, and then it turns into Soul Ring. So it'll turn eventually into a no downside Ancient Tomb. Gotta love that. Arc of Orazka, or Arch. You will be surprised at how often the card draw actually matters in this deck. You will definitely have enough mana to pay for it, and getting City's Blessing is not super easy with this deck, but it's not hard either. But between all the tutors and card draw you have, plus sowing Mycospawn, you could get this if you already have Tron or you really need those cards. So don't sleep. And Sanctum of Ugin, it's just a colorless land, but whenever you cast a colorless spell with converted mana cost 7 or greater, you may sacrifice it. You do search for a colorless creature card, put it into your hand. It doesn't even have to cost 7 itself. It's super good. It lets you just get on a roll where if you cast one Titan and you draw another one, and you can copy the stack, so you can get 2 Titans with Sanctum of Ugin. It's an incredible land in this deck. Can't sleep. Ugin's Labyrinth, if you don't need the mana value 7 or greater card, the whole time. So at first it's just a no downside Ancient Tomb, and then even when you want your card back, just get it. And it's super good synergy for your wheels. And if someone else casts a wheel, you'll always have the card underneath the card. So even though you will eventually have to tap it, losing out on 2 mana to get the card, there's a lot of little synergy in tech that makes it super strong still. Definitely auto include Eldrazi Temple. It's just no downside on that shit. It's colorless, but spend this mana only to cast colorless Eldrazi spells or activate abilities of colorless Eldrazi. Obviously that's your pay for Ulamog's crap. So, no brainer. Comes with the deck, so might as well get one. And then, like I said, we have all our boring lands, Command Tower. We have some dual lands, don't have all of them. The ping lands, Yavimaya. We have a fetch land. You could increase or decrease this number as much as you choose. You probably increase it if you find you're not getting your colors enough, because you do play a bunch of dual lands, but you do want lands that tap for colorless. That's why the ping lands are so good, because you do actually want to tap for 2 when you get Forsaken Monument games. So I definitely think the OG dual lands and the ping lands are where it's at. Just don't want to play too many lands. That's always subjective, but nothing really to talk about. I got Misty Rainforest as the 1 fetch land in the deck just because. And there it is. Yeah, just because a lot of your turn 1 plays are green and you need 2 blue a lot, so I thought maybe that it was worth getting that for specifically. But you can play as many as you want. It's all up to you. That's the beauty of this deck, is I think obviously everyone wants to stick to the pure Eldrazi sort of game plan and really have fun with that, because then why would you play Ulalek if that was not your goal? But I think your shell and your deck itself can be so dependent on your play group and just what you like to play that you could probably have this list all very different and have just as much fun and just as much success as me, or maybe even more. So I think that it makes it beautiful. I think it makes it a beautiful deck to play and pilot and get to enjoy. And I don't know about y'all, but I have a ton of fun playing this deck. Other than that, there's really nothing left to it. Tell me what you take out. Tell me what you put in. Other than that, have a good one. Oh yeah, deck list on Moxfield.